Hello, my name is Dr. Crystal Tribbett, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Tatum Larson on April 14th, 2023. I can't believe it's 2023. And this is for the In Our Own Words, the UCI Black Alumni Oral History Project. Hello, Tatum. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to speak with you and to hear about your experience as a UCI student and alumna.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
So I like to start off with some really easy questions. Not that they aren't all easy, you know the answers to all of them. But I want to know a little bit more about, you personally and where you come from. So we have a good understanding of how you got here and your experience. So can you talk to me a little bit about, where you grew up and about your general family and educational background?
Yeah, of course. So I grew up in Orange County, California. I have many brothers and sisters. I have 13 brothers and sisters. My dad was a busy bee, but on my mom's side, I have two other brothers, so Blakely and Parker. I grew up with them, and my mom was our main caretaker. My dad he was the black part of me, and then my mom was white, and I think she tried her best to educate us as much as she could from her perspective on our black side, but obviously it's not the same as being immersed in the culture and being raised by a black parent. So I kind of grew up kind of like a little bit confused about my identity and feeling a little isolated, especially in a place like Orange County in the early 2000s. So it made me feel a little bit just isolated, not having other like black friends to talk to and identify with. So I kind of found myself floundering around like different social circles and never really feeling truly accepted. So that was kind of how I felt in terms of my personal identity growing up. But educationally, I kind of struggled growing up with my academics. I was a latchkey kid. My mom was always working, and I kind of struggled to learn the way that I learned for a lot of my early childhood. So I struggled a bit academically, as did my brothers. But when my mom could, she would try to help us as much as she could and gave us opportunities to get tutoring and stuff like that. But eventually, when I got to high school, I did 2 years in high school. I decided I did not like it. I wanted to get out of there. I was just, I had friends and I had some things that made me happy. Like I was in theater and that was fun. But I just found that high school was just kind of like taking a lot out of me mentally. So I just decided to transfer into a homeschool program. And that was when I really learned the way that I learned. And that's when I was becoming more socially conscious of, different injustices. And I got really passionate about that. So kind of being in my own little incubator at that time and learning the way that I learned and getting stronger academically. And then also kind of establishing a stronger sense of self in terms of like what my personal beliefs were and finding people to identify with online who looked like me. That was a really enriching time for me. And then I went into community college first. I changed my major like 5 times. I finally settled on English. And when it came time to transfer, I was looking at different English programs. I found UCI. I was kind of like interested in journalism. I grew up watching the news, and obviously like when I was going through that social awareness shift, I was reading a lot of news articles that piqued my interest, but I never really thought, oh, I could like be a writer full time, even though my brother did that professionally for years. So in trying to find different English programs, I tried to expand my scope a little bit, and I found UCI's literary journalism program, and I'm like, okay, well, that's pretty much English. It's just kind of like a different facet of it. And I applied, I got in, and I was lucky to be able to be accepted into a couple of internships, one that led me to meeting my friend and co-creator, Sydney Charles. And from there, we were able to create a podcast and a web series. And after that, we we packed up after graduation, went to USC and got our master's. And now we're just out in the world working as young professionals as journalists. So it's been quite a journey.
Wow, that was such an awesome overview.
Thanks. Thank you so
To
much.
get us started. I actually want to go back a little bit and kind of reflect a little bit more, if you will, on some of the things that you mentioned in your introduction. You mentioned you grew up in Orange County, and I've been interviewing many alums, but not all of them. Many of them are not from Orange County. And so I wonder if you can tell us a little bit more about, where in Orange County you grew up, and, um, uh, you've alluded to trying to find your place in Orange County. And I, love to hear a little bit, learn a little bit more about how, the environment that you experienced, or the culture of Orange County, helped to shape your experience pre UCI.
Yeah, of course. Well, it's always so funny going back there now because I just noticed so much more diversity than I ever had growing up in terms of seeing people that look like me now, because it just that wasn't the case growing up. Like I just remember, walking around the mall or the store with my mom, like people would just like stare at us, and it almost felt like I was, you know, I wasn't supposed to be with her. Like that's how people would look at us. And my mom told me that a couple of times, like people asked if like my brothers and I were adopted or if she stole us. So it was just really the early 2000s in Orange County was just a really interesting time. I don't know if interesting is the best word for that, but that's the one that comes to mind. But yeah, I mean, I grew up in Anaheim Hills, which is a chiefly white area. And like, granted, I grew up very privileged. Like, my parents were both college educated professors, and, I was able to live in an area that, my mom put us in to keep us safe. That's why she told us that she moved us there. And granted, I don't experience the plight of, you know, darker skinned Black people. I have the privilege of being lighter skinned, but on that same note, there is that one drop in the bucket farce that really was kind of thrown onto us in Orange County, and people really made us feel seen for all the wrong reasons. And so I feel like in that way, I just felt isolated in that I didn't have other people to relate to in a lot of ways. Like I didn't see many people my age in my classes that looked like me. And yeah, so I feel like for that reason, I really receded into my shell and I just was a lot more quiet. Like I had my friends, but I didn't feel like fully comfortable in my skin for a very long time growing up. And, it didn't really, my mom tried her best, as a white woman to make us feel good in our skin, but you could only do so much, and our dad was like loosely around, but he wasn't there to really like teach us a lot about how to, survive, in an area like that as a young Black people. So it was kind of difficult to navigate for a while, but in educating myself later in life in my late teens and then going to college and like finding a community at UCI, like that's where I really felt for the first time in my life like empowered, and I felt like I had people to relate to. And it was so crazy because going to UCI, like that was the place where I had my first Black professor. I thought, oh my gosh, there are so many Black people here. It's amazing. And then like in talking to my friends, they're just like, no, there are like no Black people here. What are you talking about? And I'm like, I grew up in Orange County. This is a lot for me. So it was interesting going into that environment and seeing like more people who looked like me than I ever saw in my life, and then being told like, no, this is a really small percentage of people, in our community here. So that's kind of what led Sydney and I to start our podcast and like bring up those conversations of like why the percentage is so low and why there needs to be more representation on campus.
Thank you for filling in some of that for me. I want to kind of stay a little bit pre UCI because you mentioned again in your introduction that that you kind of came into your own social awareness by doing, homeschooling, and it sounds like kind of picking your own path, if you will. And I hope I've understood, what you were saying clearly. But I'm curious about learning a little bit about that too. I think that for others who are perhaps going to review this, this interview or listen to it, there's always a question of what inspires people and how they get from, point A to point B. I know we're going to talk more about your podcast, but I'm interested in kind of the seeds that were planted before you started the podcast. That again, what were you learning, or what were you, self-teaching in high school or as you went into community college about social conditions, about Black community, about Black life, and other topics, of course, that you found relevant.
Yeah, of course. Well, I remember once I made that transition into homeschool, that's when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And there was a lot of, there were a lot of conversations happening on social media. And obviously, like I was privy to violence, police violence, violence against Black people, and crimes committed against Black bodies before, but like that was when I really I got immersed into what that conversation really meant. And I started really paying attention more to those instances of violence. And it really made me feel enraged, and like a lot of people, I'm sure. And that was when I really started to question more things, and I felt more connected to my community because I was just connected in fear and anger, and I just wanted to learn more and more so I could continue to have conversations with, my family who maybe wasn't as aware or didn't care as much about similar issues. But I just remember that moment and those stories about him and other, other people who were murdered at the hands of the police really making me more socially aware and striking my interest and making me want to like learn more and become more connected to my community. That was when I really had that shift.
And so you found your way here to UCI, and you mentioned that in community college. Which community college did you go to?
I went to Santiago Canyon.
Oh, okay, yeah. That you had a lot of different majors. You landed on English, and then here at UCI you found literary journalism. Were there other aspects of UCI that kind of influenced your decision to choose UCI after Santiago, or was it the literary journalism major?
It was mostly the literary journalism major, and I grew up, hearing about UCI, and I struggled a lot academically. So UCI was never within my scope of reality in terms of where I could go to college. So, I just kind of applied as a shot in the dark, and I was like, maybe I'll get in. And I was fortunate to get in. But really what I was interested in was the literary journalism program. That's what drew me to it. And yeah, I think at the time I wasn't set on becoming a journalist, but I was interested in the idea. In community college, I briefly worked with the on-campus newspaper, and like, again, I grew up just like listening to the news, and I was becoming more aware. So I'm like, okay, maybe this is something that I could grow into. But yeah, I got there and I fell in love with it, and I kept going. So yeah.
What was it about literary journalism that you loved?
I liked, I love that you could tell real stories about real people and make art out of it. It's not so much about creating something out of nothing. There's already so much here on this earth, that needs to be explored and conversations that need to be had. And it doesn't need to read like a report either. What I love about literary journalism is that you could show the full colorful scope of a story in somebody's life and make it truthful and be able to, draw other people in who have similar experiences, and to have like a fleshed out conversation just within one story. Like that's something that really makes me feel passionate and happy to do this work. Not that I'm doing it right now, but at UCI, to be able to really dive into a story and give people the time and the effort and their flowers within a story was something that I really felt passionate about and connected to. So it was really fun for me, and I felt very passionate and lucky to be able to tell stories in the way that I think that they should be told.
What year was it that you started UCI in literary journalism?
I think it was 2019, because I graduated in 2021. Yeah, I think it was 2019.
So you came in as a junior?
Junior, yeah.
A junior. Were there particular stories that you can recall that you worked on for either that department or your classes that still kind of resonate with you, or that you still are very kind of vivid in terms of your memories of being a major?
Trying to think. I remember the one that's coming to mind is about my friend Travis. My friend Travis works at at the time he worked as a funeral director, and our task was to tell a story about somebody's everyday life, and somehow make it a fully fledged story. And so I talked to my friend Travis about the first time he went on the job to pick up a body, and it's something that you don't typically think about. And I love those kinds of stories where, you don't think about the guy who goes to a scene of like a crime or an accident, who picks up that body and tries to help their family and their loved ones make peace with their death. And that's literally what my friend does for his life, his job. And it was really interesting to just learn more about him and learn more about why he does what he does and what that experience was like. He just described it as a pretty, sobering experience, and it made him feel empowered to do the work that he does. It's a really important job that I think isn't often discussed or appreciated enough, but it's something that happens every single day. And that's what I really love about literary journalism. I mean, you could go in depth about the experiences of people who you may not think about on a daily basis. So that's one that comes to mind off the top of my head, just being able to celebrate my friend and talk about his experiences, and really talk about the bridge between life and death and how we talk about that in our culture. It was really interesting.
It's an incredibly fascinating topic.
Yeah, no, it was really fun. I mean, not fun, but it was cool to talk about. And it really made me respect my friend a lot. And I think that's what's also really cool about journalism. Like, it just makes you grow a deeper respect for people and what they go through on a daily basis.
Mhm. Were there particular people within the literary journalism department that were influential for you or inspirational?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, Amy DePaul is top of mind. She's the one who really pushed my friend and I to start a podcast, and she was so encouraging and really helped us along the way, guided us, and she still is a resource to us. I mean, she wrote our letters of recommendation for our grad school applications, so she was just incredibly influential. And Annabelle, uh, her name is escaping me right now. Annabelle Adams, she wasn't a professor, but she was a part of the communications department, and she helped us facilitate the web series, and she was a great mentor. Barry Siegel, he's the head of the department. He really loves the art of journalism. He really believes in it, and he really showed us the power of good storytelling through his own work, and then also just the work that he showed us in class. And then, of course, Erica Hayasaki. She's just an amazing person, and just seeing all the incredible work that she continues to do now is just, it's so cool. And I love the stories that she's able to tell about her own community, about her experiences, and she's just testament to how you can tell real stories about real people and make a difference. So those are the people that I really recognize as major influences. There are more too, but those are the main four.
Well, I don't think I can delay anymore. I've got to get you to talk more specifically about your podcast and how that got started. What's your podcast called? Who's your partner? All the good stuff.
Of course, all those details. Yeah. Well, it really started because, I worked at KUCI, the radio station on campus, and I was putting together stories with them as their campus skinny reporter on a weekly basis. And then my co-creator, Sydney, she was a newspaper editor for the newspaper on campus, a campus run one. And Amy saw us and saw what we were doing separately and said, okay, these are two students who, are doing two things that could make a really cool podcast together. And we just got together and we talked about what we would want to focus on with the podcast. And we decided that since there was at the time and is a low percentage of Black students on the UCI campus, we really wanted to serve as some sort of a voice for students and to cover topics that would relate to and matter to Black students on campus. So that's really how the podcast started. And we decided to call it Black Fam 2.5 because we did a little math equation. We took all of the percentages of percentage of Black students on different UC campuses, and we put them all together, and we came up with 2.5. We don't know if that's like the most accurate number, but it sounded good. Black Fam 2.5, but it really just symbolizes the low percentage of Black students on UC campuses and PWI campuses in general. And then Black Fam just came from how, although it's a small, community, we are still a family, and we're all connected and deserve to feel empowered with our stories. So yeah, that's how it started. And it really began as a student-focused podcast. We focused on students on campus who were running their own businesses and people who were doing work with students on campus for like mental health reasons, stuff like that. We talked to a lot of students and a lot of faculty about Black issues on campus. And then George Floyd was killed, and then we just really recognized that there needed to be a shift in our coverage. And then COVID hit too. And so that was when we really started to expand our focus outwards. And we said, okay, we can't just focus on student issues only, because there are things happening externally that are affecting the students on campus and, the wider community that we're a part of. So we really need to expand our focus out. So we did a Black Lives Matter episode following that, and then a Black Health Matters, when obviously there were just mass amounts of Black and brown people being killed by COVID, and they weren't getting the care that they needed. So that's when we really started to focus on topics that were beyond UCI, because they were just important to focus on. So yeah, that was kind of the story with the podcast, and we just kind of ran with it from there and covered, everything from, the Black Lives Matter movement. We went to protests and we got sound, and we, interviewed people, and we also covered the importance of highlighting Black women, the Black LGBTQI community. So we really just tried to cover different facets of the community in that way. Yeah.
How many podcasts total did you did you do? Do you know? Do you
We
recall?
we didn't do too many. I recall, I think we did like 10 episodes, but each episode was like an hour and a half to like 2 hours. So they were very long. A lot of production went into them. But yeah, we tried to cover a lot in each episode, and we cut them into like little sections and had different interviews throughout. If I were to redo it, I would want to do like smaller 30-minute podcasts probably, because they were pretty long. But yeah, we did 10, I believe, and we were kind of playing with the idea of doing more. But then we just got busy with, trying to graduate and, applying to grad school and all that stuff. So got a little bit too hectic to continue post UCI, but still really proud of the work that we did.
Um, can you speak a little bit about the impact of doing your podcast and covering the sorts of topics that you were covering during a very challenging social time, social and political time, between 2020 to the present, honestly. But
Yeah.
the time you graduated, right, there was a lot going on, and you and Sydney were kind of jumping into these topics full force. So I'd love to hear you speak a little bit about the impact or experience, kind of the feelings that doing that work had on you.
Yeah. I mean, it was very cathartic almost to be able to have the conversations that we were having together anyway, because we would talk about this, if the mic was on or not, because it was just these topics are just so prevalent in our daily lives and in our communities. So these conversations were just being had between us anyway. So to be able to talk about them and process them and talk to people out there doing the work was it was a really nice way to process really difficult facts and difficult news that was happening around us. So for us, it was just a way to be able to process and get through a really difficult time together. And I think people related to that as well in listening to our podcast. And our hope was that they felt like they were talking with friends too, and they were kind of trying to parse out all of this really difficult, challenging news as well alongside of us. So I think that for us, it was really a way to deepen that connection and to have difficult conversations amongst people that we trusted and respected in the community.
In general, what was the UCI community, and more specifically the Black community at UCI, like during your time as a student here, and which happened to overlap with social unrest and COVID and all of that? What was your relationship with the community?
Well, I remember just feeling very accepted by the community on campus. I was a part of the on-campus Black Student Union, and I would go to their meetings, and there was just a feeling of connectedness in those groups and just mutual understanding. And there was like almost like a protective element to being in those circles, and I felt that. So although like the community on campus is very diverse and everybody's spread out, and so in large crowds it seems very thin, in terms of who was around us and who looked like us. But in those spaces where we could come together and have conversations and be connected, you could feel that energy of this mutual like love and understanding. So that was what I experienced with the Black community on campus, just a lot of support. And then also like it made me look inwardly too about like where I stand as a person of color, but a lighter skinned person of color too, like coming into my awareness as where like I have privileges where a lot of people don't, in the community as well. So it made me feel connected and more aware of where I stand. And yeah, it's something that I didn't have growing up, so it was really nice.
You mentioned you were on the Black Student Union. Were you an officer, or you were a member, or
Yeah, so
how are
I
you
was
involved?
just I wasn't in office. I went to the meetings. I attended the meetings quite often, so it was just it was nice to be a part of those circles.
Give me just 1 second.
Okay.
Thank you for that. Were there other organizations that are affiliations that you had on campus? There are a number of clubs and groups and houses. Were there other ways that you were involved on campus outside of your podcast and like the Black Student Union?
Yeah. So I was part of KUCI for 2 semesters, and then I was an intern, and then I became an editor of the campus newspaper until I graduated.
And how were if at all, did your involvement in those organizations to kind of impact or influence your experience on campus as a student?
Yeah, I think it just deepened my understanding of what was going on campus, and so in that way, it kind of helped Sydney and I inform our podcast and what we talked about, because we got to know um, what was important to students on campus, who was really important on campus in terms of like faculty and staff, and so just kind of widened our scope of like what UCI actually is and what it represents. So I think it really just deepened my understanding of what it means to be meant to be a student on campus.
Did you live on campus while you were here?
I didn't, no. So at the time I was living with my dad, so I was a commuter.
Um, and let's see, we're covering so much, and I'm going to make sure I review my questions to make sure that I'm not missing anything. We've been focusing a lot on this conversation about literary journalism, your writing, and involvement in that department, and work with the Black Student Union. But I wonder if I'm missing anything too. I know that students participate in a number of classes here at UCI, and have a number of opportunities to take advantage of. So if you could tell me a little bit more about what things you participated in outside of literary journalism, and your kind of your podcast, your main activity, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I took a great class with Professor John Morello, I think that's his name. It was a Black TV and film class, and I just remember that was a really influential class, just being a part of it and just learning more about Black culture and the importance of Black film and television. It was really interesting, and being able to like really dive into it and analyze why certain writers and directors made artistic choices and how influential those choices were in the wider scope of Black history. Like that was really cool. So that was one class that I remember really enjoying. And he's just a great professor and was really supportive. So it was nice being in that environment.
Um, any other kind of fond memories of UCI that you'd like to reflect on?
It was weird because like I was really only on campus for 6 minutes before, not 6 minutes, 6 months before we were on lockdown. So I feel like I didn't really have the full like college experience within that time. But I really remember, I mean, I grew really close with my friend Sydney, and I just remember that we formed a really deep friendship that we still have to this day. Um, just producing the podcast was incredibly enriching. But then also, I think my time at KUCI, I have a lot of fond memories of staying on campus until like 2 a.m. doing my internship and like doing the late shows and learning what it really means to be in broadcast news. That was really interesting too, and I think it prepared me for what I do now. you know the late nights and the early mornings. So that's something that I reflect on really fondly. But yeah, I mean, what I really remember on campus are just the people that I met and the connections that I made. So that's that was the best part of being at UCI.
I feel like I have to ask you a little bit more about being a student, and a transfer student during COVID, because that was such, I mean, you just said you're like you were on campus for like 6 months and then
Yeah,
COVID hit, and
exactly.
that became the majority, that really shaped the rest of your uh university experience here at UCI, because so many things were, the way of doing things were modified and unexpected and what have you.
Right.
So if you could share a bit about that experience, like what was it like to be that a student here, a
It
new
was
student, relatively new,
it was so weird because it was I feel like I climbed this huge mountain by like, graduating from community college and like finally getting to a 4 year, and I was like, yeah, I made it. And then I was here for 6 months, and I feel like I did a great deal within those 6 months. I really like jumped in full force and I tried to do as much as I could on campus. And you know that was really a lucky scenario because we went on lockdown almost immediately after that. So being able to have that foundation of the work that I did within those 6 months was something that really kept me going when there was nothing that you could do in the outside world. So being able to have an outlet indoors, staying safe with my family, I mean, that was something that was I was very fortunate to have that. But I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of pissed. I was kind of pissed off like the rest of the world that I made it to this point of being at a 4 year, and like I was so excited to have that full college experience, and then boom, lockdown. But again, grateful to have friends and grateful to have just a microphone, literally and figuratively, to speak into, to just vent and to experience connection with other people when you couldn't really see anybody face to face.
Was your graduation you graduated in 2022?
2021. So it
2021.
was, yeah. So there was I'm trying to remember. There was an online one, but then there was an opportunity to walk on stage. So I was able to walk on stage. My dad was able to see me walk across the stage. At this point, my mom had passed, and I was living with my dad full time, and that really helped deepen my connection to him as well. So it was nice to see him there and my other family on his side. So it really that was a nice time. Yeah.
Um, there has just been so many highlights that you've touched on during our conversation, and I wonder, other than, or maybe in addition to COVID, if there were particular challenges that you faced at UCI that you had to overcome and how you did that.
Yeah. I I lost my mom in 2017. And during that time, I mean, my dad's on the older side. I didn't mention that. I mean, he has 13 kids over the span of many decades. So at that point, he was already in his 80s and he wasn't really able to properly take care of my brothers and I. So at that point, I became the legal guardians of my two brothers, one who was underage, and my other brother is he's disabled, he has autism, and he's not able to take care of himself. So at that point, I became their legal conservators, and it was a really hard time. My younger brother Parker was obviously he didn't handle my mom's passing well, neither did my other brother Blakely, and just trying to take care of them while trying to get into, you know, get through community college and transfer, and then also taking care of my dad who was experiencing a lot of severe health issues during the time. I became his full caretaker. That was really difficult, and it was hard to balance. And so going to UCI almost became like a haven for me, and I would like those late nights at KUCI they were exciting to me, and they were like a nice little reprieve from the stress at home that I was experiencing. So I almost welcomed the extra work and the opportunities to stay on campus, because it was like it was going to my happy place, you know, that I worked hard to get to. So that was like another little point of frustration when COVID hit, because I'm like, man, I lost my happy place. I lost my outlet to go to. But luckily, I mean, obviously, I was still able to go there and have opportunities to stay connected with people there. But yeah, that was really hard. But I was able to overcome it, and I think it made me stronger as a person. Oh, I think
Thank
you're
you.
muted.
Yeah, thank you for sharing
Yeah,
that part of your life that, clearly there's life in their school, and both of those things happen at the same time. And
yeah,
so it's inspiring to hear how people navigate life and school
yeah,
and other things that are happening in the world at the same time.
right.
Um, so you graduated in 2021,
Mhm.
and what happened after that? What are you up to?
Yeah, so after that, Sydney and I, like a month after graduating from UCI, we moved into an apartment in LA and started going to school at USC. And we started pursuing our master's in journalism. And from that point on, we just hit the ground running. And um, we we kind of went our own way in our own separate directions, like not out of malice, obviously, but like, you know, we started finding our own path, and it kind of led us closer and closer to broadcast journalism, which is where we kind of were rounding the corner to at the latter part of our UCI careers. So we really went full force with trying to become broadcast journalists at USC. So we took all the classes that we needed to, every opportunity to get on camera, we did it. And it kind of led us to where we are now as broadcast journalists. So yeah, the year after graduating from UCI was just like a really intense master's program that seems like a fever dream. And then now we're just working.
Are there are there particular aspects of your UCI experience that have really shaped the decisions you've made to go into broadcast journalism, or how you approach your work in your current career?
Yeah. I think what I really learned from UCI was going to people, seeking out interviews from people who have actually experienced whatever topic we're covering. That's something that's really important, and not just going to experts, going to people on the ground who are really experiencing whatever phenomenon is going on and whatever we're covering in a daily news setting. That's something that's very important to. It was important when we went to our master's program, and it was important when in our daily work now, finding real people to tell real stories about. And also, I think just in terms of our interest in broadcast, the podcast and the web series really taught us the power of visual storytelling and the power of being able to show a person's story and their life and what they go through on a daily basis, and not just tell it on paper. I think that's something that really it's a big link to that literary journalism background, being able to make art of somebody's story and to be able to tell a fully fledged, colorful story. That's something that I really took with me from UCI.
Thank you. A lot of what you've described as a student in general at UCI, and as a person growing up in Orange County, I mean, I would characterize you as a true success and
Thank you.
of course, and
Appreciate it.
accomplishing your goals, and really navigating some interesting experiences and times, and I would really welcome you sharing what your thoughts are on how Black students, faculty, and even staff at UCI can, thrive here, or what's needed for them to thrive, given the experiences that you have had coming into, before UCI and during and after.
Mm-hmm. Well, just viewing my experience there and like what I've seen at UCI, I think there just needs to be less hyperbole and more opportunity for people on campus, more opportunities to, not just speak to audiences who are interested about the Black community, but actually speak to Black people on campus. I think that needs to be heightened. I think there needs to be more resources for that, and I think those discussions are really important and powerful, and I think that's what really drew me to this project in particular, and why I'm so happy that it's happening, because these conversations are so necessary, and to be able to canonize people's stories and talk about why their experiences are important and why, people are worthy to be here and have conversations with people who look like them. I think that's just invaluable, and I think there needs to be more opportunities to do that on campus. So from my perspective as a literary journalism major, I would say just more opportunities to have conversations that can be heard by the masses.
Any words of wisdom for current and future students?
I would say find what you're passionate about and find your people. I think that's really important and empowering. I think that could take you really far, and get out of your own way. I think that's something that I struggle with too, just getting out of my own way. But you also have to have the opportunities to be able to get out of your own way too. So that kind of puts it back on the school as well. So yeah, that would be my 2 cents for students. Yeah.
Is there anything that you were hoping that we'd be able to reflect on during our time together that we didn't get to?
Um, Trying to think. Nothing comes to mind right now. But yeah, I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of this project. I hope I gave decent answers. I'm sorry, I get really nervous and sometimes I talk too fast and I don't go through everything that I want to talk about and I come across as a little spacey, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about this topic and to be a part of it. It's really special to me, and yeah, I'm excited to see the finished product. I think it's really cool. It's very, very cool.
Well, thank you. And of course, there's no wrong to this.
Yeah,
So,
good.
and there is no wrong, and it's all about taking time actually to focus on you and other alumni and your experiences. So we really appreciate that. I have one more question, and I've been asking everybody this out of kind of curiosity and see what people come up with. If you had to describe your UCI experience in 3 words, what 3 words would you use?
Um, the first one would be enriching, powerful, and what would be the third one? That's tough. Connective, I guess. I feel like a lot of connective tissue was built during that time. I don't know if that makes sense, but I felt a lot more whole as a person when I left.
Mm, It's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank
Really
you.
appreciate it. I know you're super busy, but again, our goal really here is to again honor and reflect on UCI Black students and to be able to offer these stories for others to kind of listen to and learn from and be inspired by for future UCI generations. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. Thank you for your time as well. I really appreciate it.